Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the story about what if Rengoku survived. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and like the video as well. It really means a lot. So let's start the what if. After Rengoku lost half of his eyesight, he started dreaming. It wasn't that the nights had suddenly gotten longer, it was time that, during his recovery, had slowed down. During the day, he'd sit in his courtyard, observing his younger brother. He'd feel the warmth of the sun, and he'd let himself do nothing at all. In his usual life, when he wasn't training, he was fighting. The days were easy because he could choose the memories that would appear in front of him. Especially right before sunset, when everything was bathed in the orange light, he could see himself as the kid he used to be. With a stick in his hand, he'd copy all the movements he'd seen his father do. Relentlessly until night came and his mother called him back in. It was always so disappointing when another day would go by and his father didn't come home. Kyojuro knew his father was out on a mission, protecting others, and that made him feel pride, even more so knowing that this was his destiny, as well, to become as strong and brave as him, and to continue their legacy. But still, when father came home it was better than anything else. He'd pick him up in his arms, laughing and asking him if he'd taken care of mother while he was away. Very often he would bring him treats, telling him that today was for resting, but tomorrow they would train, which was Kyojuro's favorite thing. He remembered very clearly when his brother had been born. It was unexpected, a fortnight too early. Their father had been out on a mission but scheduled to come back soon. It had taken him 2 entire days to make his way back home, 2 days during which Kyojuro refused to leave his mother's side for even 1 second. He didn't care to do anything else but sit by her, while she held his little brother, Senjuro. He hadn't seen many babies in his short life, but he still felt so much worry when he looked at how small he was. Too small. When their father finally arrived, the relief was immense. He was big enough for all of them, and nothing bad could ever happen. He observed as father took Senjuro in his arms for the first time, his eyes soft but with such warmth burning in them. Kyojuro would spend a lot of years wondering where had those eyes gone. "Should we go eat?" Senjuro's voice was low but loud enough to startle him back to the present. Kyojuro struggled a bit to stand up, but at least it didn't hurt as much as it had at first. His body was slowly getting back to what it used to be before the fight. Of course. A strong person needs great nourishment, he said before taking Senjuro under his arm. Now that he was feeling better, restless energy was starting to build up and his dreams were getting more and more chaotic. Some nights it would be harmless dreams, more memories of his childhood, days long gone, kind words from a mother, a father he'd admired until he hadn't, a younger brother he'd seen being born into the world. Senjuro's laughter would disappear into the crashing noise of a vase being smashed. Soft arms would lull him back to peace, a kiss on the forehead and a reassuring whisper, "You are good, a good son." But the nightmares were different. It was always a fight, sometimes against someone faceless, sometimes demons he'd already defeated. And then there was this one recurring nightmare that always left him breathless. It would be a normal day. He would either be training or simply walking somewhere, when the walls turned black and the floor, fire. There would be a long path to walk. He knew he should turn back, close his eyes and wait for this to be over. But he would always keep walking forward until a pair of strong arms appeared right in front of him, grabbing him. Then a face, wild eyes staring at him. It was always that same one. Akaza, the demon that had almost killed him. "You didn't think you'd get away, did you?" the face would say. "I was always going to find you. This is your destiny." As the fire engulfed them, the words would echo over and over. Destiny. It was usually by then that Rengoku would wake up, rays of sunlight on his face. Once again saved by the dawn. Once he was awake, he didn't like to think about the dreams. They didn't matter, he had no control over them and Kyojuro had made a choice to not dwell on things he couldn't do anything about. Sitting down for breakfast with his brother, he did think of the fight that happened, the one that had taken his eye and almost one of his arms. He remembered the exhaustion and the firm decision to go forward, no matter what. The others had screamed his name while his resolve had never wavered. Seeing Senjuro happily eat his food, he wondered of what could have happened. Kyojuro knew dealing with what-ifs was dangerous business, one he didn't like to indulge in, but it was hard to ignore them when all he needed to do was close his eyes to see the night horrors. The horror of finding entire families destroyed and then avenging them, a seemingly endless cycle. The grief that surrounded every one of his missions. It made him feel fear, to see the same terrible morning befall Senjuro. But when Senjuro looked up, he saw so much strength in his eyes. A warm fire that was so familiar to him. How could Kyojuro be afraid? He had never doubted his little brother even once, even when he hadn't been able to train and learn a breath. Not for 1 second had Kyojuro thought him weak. He knew that strength came in different ways, making the world whole. It was one of the things his mother had taught him, to always be strong, but almost as important, to understand that everyone's strength couldn't be the same, shouldn't be the same. He remembered his successor, Mitsuri-san. She'd been lost in her own power for so long, made to feel shame for it. Seeing her become the great pillar she was now made Kyojuro feel incredibly proud. She'd always had it within her, but to know he had been able to help, it felt like it was his real purpose, to help others. And then there was Iguaro-san. He thought of the boy he had been. Smaller than him, but he'd already gone through so much Kyojuro could barely imagine. He'd seen him and he'd wanted to give him part of his strength, through friendship, but Iguaro-san had never needed it. He had strengths Kyojuro could also not have imagined. He chuckled, remembering a few other possible successors. Kamado-san, Aogatsuma-san and Hashibara-san. They'd been told to wait for him to rest, and then they'd be a blee to train with him. He'd seen courage and determination in them, reminding him of his younger self. Oni-san, why are you laughing? Senjuro asked him, with a smile. Oh, it's nothing. Just thinking of what a nice day it is. Senjuro nodded, still smiling to himself. You know, Kyojuro continued, reaching to ruffle Senjuro's hair, there are some kids I would like you to meet. I'm sure you would get along. It was later in the day, after lunch, and they were once again in the backyard. Senjuro was busy fixing up some sort of instrument, while Kyojuro rested peacefully. It was easy to let the cicadas lull him to sleep. When he opened his eyes again, he knew he was in a dream. Nothing had changed about the day, except for the person sitting next to him. He smelled her scent and knew it was her before even turning to look. Mother, he said. She smiled, and guided him to lie his head on her shoulder. Just like when he was a child. They stayed like that for what felt like hours, beyond what should have been the sunset, the unwavering sun up in the sky. He felt his mother's hand softly caressing his hair, and he wondered if it was possible to fall asleep within a dream. Mother, he asked suddenly, surprising himself, do you have any regrets? The hand that had been gently caressing his hair stopped. No. I don't. Do you? She asked. Do you have any? He thought about it. Once again, it could have been hours. But under the endless blue sky, he knew the answer. No. I don't. Without looking at her, he knew she was smiling. Rengoku-san. Rengoku-san. A soft voice shook him awake. Rengoku-san, sorry to wake you up. It was Mitsuri-san. Kyojuro smiled, happy to see his friend even if unexpected. Ah, these kids really wanted to come see you. She pointed behind her where the three boys stood. Kamado-san let out a watery Rengoku-san. They've been bothering everyone about it. A voice said, from the only tree in his backyard. Igoro-san. They won't shut up about it. They don't understand the importance of being a pillar, there is no time to be wasted with petty things. Or bothersome children. They were just so worried about you. Mitsure said. Truth be told, we've missed you, too. Right, Iguaro-san? Mitsuri asked, but a muffled scoff was the only answer that came from him. Hashibara-san walked towards him, without his boar head. You saved us, damn it. he said in an angry tone, but Kyojuro understood. Can you not watch your language? What is wrong with you? Screamed behind him the last of the little group, Aoyagatsume-san. Then he looked at Kyojuro. We're so glad you're healthy. Thank you for saving us. Are you okay? Will you be okay? This time it was Kamado-san, now kneeling down in front of him. You took so much damage, I'm so sorry, we weren't of any help to you. I'm so sorry. Of course I am. Kyojuro said, before the boy could get any more dismayed. After all, I am Kyojuro Rengoku, the flame pillar. Warmth spread across his chest. It was good to remind himself, he was the flame pillar. Mitsuri joined the boy, taking one of his hands between hers. I'm so happy, Rengoku-san. I'm so happy you're well. Iguaro laughed from up high. I told them there was no reason to worry, but do they ever listen? Kyojuro smiled at him as Iguaro looked away. Senjuro joined them, and while introductions were made, Mitsuri sat next to him. He seems happy, she said, nodding toward Senjuro. He's a good kid. He deserves to be happy. Good. And you, Kenroji-chan? She was looking at the boys, smiling. I'm great. As long as I can help and protect them, and everyone else. She turned towards him. Isn't that what you've always told me? Then, she looked at his sword. It was always next to him, out of habit, even thought he hadn't been giving it much use if any at all. Have you been training? Let's go then. For old time's sake, she stood up, sword in hand. He hadn't been training, but now was a good time as any to start. No time to waste, he exclaimed back at her, relishing in the energy. He stood up and walked all the way to the center of the backyard. Grabbing his blade properly, he got in fighting position. He tested his muscles, which still felt a little sore, but it didn't matter. Kyojuro looked around him, at his little brother playing with Iguaro's snake while Tanjiro worriedly told him to be careful, even thought it was obvious the snake only hissed at the latter. The other two boys were going at it with Iguaro-san, Inosuke trying to climb the tree while Zenitsu grabbed him, yelling to stop. He looked at Mitsuri-san, also getting in fighting position on the other side, stronger than ever. His body wasn't at its best, but it truly did not matter, because his strength came from somewhere else. He breathed in a big gulp of air, and smiled. This was his destiny. I'm ready. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed this what if, please subscribe to the channel and like the video as well. It really means a lot. Peace.